Bob?
Just to add to what Hans said, I mentioned before that the deal is that the Iranians ship their low-enriched uranium to Russia. Now, the Iranians have said, we can't trust these partners. We want to keep that low-enriched uranium on our territory until the fuel assemblies start coming to this reactor. Well, who aren't they trusting there? The Russians may well be taking that personally. And I think that's another reason why Iranian behavior is bringing the P5+1 countries closer together.
Question for Jim. What do you think the United States should do about Iran's meddling intervention influence in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Well, I think that going back to the early days, that is, so shortly after we went into Afghanistan in '01, right after 9/11, Iran has been deeply involved in more than meddling, in terrorism, in supplying weapons, including particularly IEDs to Iraqi rebels, to and terrorists, to spending a great deal of time and effort and resources trying to keep there from being a Shiite majority democracy in Iraq and trying to keep Afghanistan unstable. My own view is that although it's hard to shift gears now, it was a very bad decision not to respond immediately and forcefully to them, including with cross-border operations, when they started doing this and we started detecting. And Richard Clark and military commanders, all sorts of people have made quite clear how extensive the Iranian involvement has been in part of Afghanistan and certainly in Iraq. I think under the present circumstances, one has to find some way to work with the Iraqi government, which in spite of all looks like it's put together a decent election law and is proceeding to have elections and will open slots, open lists for its party so it's more transparent than the last election and so on. And they have every interest in the world, although fellow Shiites in a sense, and most of them have every interest in the world in keeping there from being Iranian domination of Iraq. And people like Muqtada al-Sadr and the others who were on the Iranian payroll have lost a great deal of power and influence in Iraq over the course of the last 6 months to a year, particularly as the Anbar awakening and the surge have manifested themselves. So I tend to think that one doesn't want to rock the Iraqi boat. The key thing here is to work with the new government of Iraq, supplying whatever intelligence and whatever help we can to them for them to keep their Iranian neighbors in line. With respect to Afghanistan, the ball may be a bit more in our court, and that's a tough call.
I'm told one more question, and so I want to ask a provocative one. Several of you have outlined various scenarios, what would happen if, so I'll give you the most provocative itself. It's April 2010. I hope each one of you will answer this. The West has concluded after a frustrating year of sanctions that the path is confrontation, and then Iran once again says it still wants favorable talks. What do we do then? Yeah, please.
Our patience is limited. The President has made clear that by the end of this year, we believe we'll be in a position to assess the seriousness of Iran in pursuing a peaceful diplomatic track. April of 2010 is too late.
The question is, April 2010, what happens where we are right now?
We've decided that they're not going to comply. The confrontation may be looming. And then they come back to us and say, we want favorable talks. What do we do then? And can we trust them?
I mean, again, I think at a very broad level, we should, whatever happens, continue to maintain the dignity and poise of a superpower. We don't need to reciprocate kind of Iran's death to America culture. But I would say that, again, the conclusion that I've reached is that the fundamental problem, the more fundamental problem we have with Iran has to do with the character of the regime than its nuclear ambitions. And I'm concerned whether it's April 2010 or 3, 4, 5 years from now, how we're going to look back at this moment. Are we going to say that we were steadfast despite Iran's kind of dithering and we were able to reach a nuclear accommodation? Or are we going to look back and say there was a real moment internally in Iran to kind of foment or expedite the prospect of some type of political reform, but instead of taking that seriously, we focused all of our efforts on the nuclear issue, and that moment passed us by.
Thank you.
I have no doubt that in April 2010, we will continue the excellent advice that we are giving today. But more seriously, I think that we are now discussing the tremendous difficulties of getting anywhere with negotiations, and whether we have stiff sanctions or weaker sanctions, etc. We are not really discussing very much what would happen if you were to go for a bombing, Israeli, American, or whatever. What are the consequences of that? Where do we go then? And I think you would need a much more intense analysis of that before you get a yes to that quest.
And last but not least, Jim Woolsey.
Well, in a smiling, statesmanlike, and diplomatic way, we should undertake all of the actions in support of the dissidents that I described earlier, if we hadn't done it yet. We should implement as complete a secondary boycott of every company of any kind or bank doing any kind of business with Iran that would be permitted under the WTO. And they may need to be region-targeted sanctions on specific companies doing business with the Revolutionary Guard, et cetera, but as broad a set of sanctions as we can do, and not to wait on the Chinese and Russians, implement them ourselves if need be, and along with other like-minded countries. And finally, I should say that I think the President has done a fine job of speaking out in support of the Iranian dissidents and freedom of elections and freedom of speech in Iran. Unfortunately, so far it's been the French president rather than the American one. And so I would like to see us follow President Obama, to follow President Sarkozy's lead.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking 4 exceptional, informative, and occasionally entertaining presentations.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, distinguished panelists.